Hey, I'm Sean Provencher. Welcome to today's podcast. And today we're continuing along a little theme we've been on for a while surrounding hiring. So we've been talking about the process I go through, and I know it's lengthy, but it's what I do. The process I go through when hiring someone onto my team could be an agent who's in sales, could be an administrator. We're kind of painting the landscape that this would be your first hire because hopefully you found this resource before going out and making your first hire. Most people don't, they just wing it. And today we're going to do another preliminary step. So today we're going to talk about an exercise that everyone should do before they create a job profile, before they start interviews, before, good heavens, before they hire anyone. I want to talk about your organizational chart. Okay. So today what we're going to do is I'm going to run you through what that is. I'm going to give you some guidelines and some pointers. It is a simple thing to create. It does not need to be an overwhelming project. I will probably talk for a little while today about it just because there's a lot that I think someone should bear into account as they make it. But really, this isn't an overwhelming thing. It's not crazy. It's not complicated. It should be something that you can put together in a pretty straightforward fashion. Okay. Probably, if you've been following along at this point, I think we're like number 4, number 5 in this series, maybe even further than that. You're probably thinking, Sean's a crazy person. Like, this is insane. I would never have thought that I need to do so much stuff before hiring someone. And here's the deal: you don't have to, but it's a lot of money. It's a lot of responsibility. It's a huge risk. And so, the more that you can do to have clarity on who this person is, how they need to show up, what your expectations of them are, what you're going to do to support them, how you're going to pay them, what their first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, all that stuff, what that all looks like. The more that you do in advance, the less risk there is. The higher the probability that they're going to be successful, and the less stressful it's going to be along the way because you know exactly what you're measuring them against, what you're expecting to happen. Okay, so the org chart is another one of the stops along the road that you should make before you go out and do anything that would involve speaking to people, advertising the role, or especially offering someone a job. And what an organizational chart really is it's a tool. It's a one-page document typically that depicts your organization and depicts all the roles in the organization, and it's really simple. It's that representation visually of how your organization is structured. Okay. So it's going to have all the different roles. You can put names or roles. I prefer roles and names in brackets personally. And then it has lines going from one person to the other, depicting who reports to who. So it gives layers of leadership and authority. It shows who is responsible for overseeing and supporting who within the organization. Um, and it really just kind of gives you an easy way to show someone what the team looks like. Okay, so why would we do this? Well, first of all, the most important person that you're doing this for isn't the person you're going to hire, it's you. Many of us hire due to a need. So we're like, I'm overwhelmed, I need support, my people are at bandwidth, I have a need. And so we'll go out and we'll find someone who fills that need. And what an organizational chart does is it forces us to put some thought and foresight into how that person will interact with the organization, what their greater responsibility is going to be, because sometimes we feel that need, and that's just really kind of a niche need, and yet there's all these other things that this person could serve. It forces us to think about who's going to onboard and train and hire them. um, and it also gives us the opportunity during the hiring process to look that person in the eye and say, oh, by the way, not only is this where you fit in and who you report to and what the structure of leadership is, but here's how you climb the ladder here. So we were talking in one of our recent episodes about creating a compelling mission, a vision, a values. And we talked as well about how, if you don't have that ready yet, some of the things that would attract people aside from that could be things like opportunity for growth or advancement. And being able to visually show someone that you have a structure to your business, there's a reason that it's organized the way that it is, and where they're starting and how they can grow, that's powerful because it demonstrates a level of experience and professionalism. And also it shows them like, hey, this isn't a seat we're trying to glue you to that you're going to live in for the rest of your life. This is something that you're going to get started in, And then throughout your career, hopefully a long career with us, here's how you're going to grow. Here's what you can move into next. Okay. So getting started, all you're going to do is you're going to create your current org model. And so that's going to be, if it's you running the entire business, it's literally just going to be you. Usually what would happen next if it was just you is you'll talk about what you're growing into. And this is where it's kind of tricky because you want to think into the future. And it's best to think a few moves ahead. Okay. If you are only thinking about that next hire, it's really easy to go out and just hire again based on the challenge, the problem, the need that you currently have, and you hire someone who kind of has might not have the most depth to their role. If instead you say, right now I'm hiring this role, but what I really need in the long run is this role, which is going to manage this, this, and this, then it gives you a lot more foresight into what you should pay them, maybe who that person needs to be and who they need to be able to grow into. It's going to give you a lot more foresight onto what you can, and we talked about this already, but the path that they can have within your organization. I think the perfect example of this is actually going to be what really in a real estate business, and I would reason most businesses should be your first hire, which is an administrative hire. We almost in any business, we almost always are going to hire administrative first because it tends to be a lower cost and that allows you to stay in higher pay activities. So salespeople are expensive. And it's not because they're bad people or they're doing something wrong. It's because it's a bloody hard job and not very many people like doing it. So when you get a good one, you want to pay them as much as you can so you can keep them around. They can help you grow your business. They're attached directly to your success. Administrative people tend to be easier to train. Really good ones are worth their weight in gold. And at the same time, a lot of the things that a really good administrator can do for you can be parsed out to other people. It can be a job that's systemized. Sometimes technology can help with it. So the first hire is something that you should use to offset your time so you can stay in sales. Okay. So the perfect example is an administrator. Well, why? Okay. Imagine that you're planning to grow a larger business. Oftentimes, if you get this first hire right, this first administrative hire, if you knock it out of the park, that person will grow to be not just your executive assistant long term. Often that person will grow to be your administrative leadership. So that person will be, your director of operations or something like that, and they'll carry themselves up along their way. That person often could end up being your president or your CEO way down the road if you plan to hire yourself out of the role. So by creating an org chart for what your business is going to look like 3 years, 5 years from now, it forces you to think through who you ultimately need. And sometimes you could make better decisions in the moment because of that. Imagine if you knew that you wanted this person to grow up inside the organization and take on future roles. It might be smart to invest a little bit more in their salary in anticipation of that allowing you to get the caliber of person that you're not going to need to replace in 2 or 3 years. Or you're not going to need to bring a director of operations in underneath them and then have them get cross-trained and then jump above. That's an awkward move to make. But if you get the right person in at the gate, then it could be clear sailing for several years. Okay, so you want to start with the end in mind. You're going to draw today's org chart, and then you're going to skip a couple years down the road. And I'll let you decide based on how fast you want to grow, what kind of challenges you think you're going to have, what you think the structure of the business ultimately is going to be. Depending on what you have envisioned, reach out as far as you can. Try to map that out. And then think about baby steps. What are the intermediary steps? When are you adding this person? When are you adding that person? Okay. And that's all that this is. This is literally it. Here we are today. Here we are in the future. One fun thing that I do when I make my org charts for Endgame is I take my future org chart and I put it all in one piece where I show here are the roles that we already have placed. And I put names next to them. And then for the roles that we know that we aspire towards adding, I add years and quarters. So I'll be like, we wanted to bring in a head coach. We're ahead of schedule, which is really cool. So I was hiring for this head coach and we knew that we needed this role. And we put head coach Q1 2024. And that just basically meant by Q1 2024, I need to go out and I need to find this person. We knew that we wanted to have several people who were locational partners that were going to help us build out regions and stuff like that. So we said, location partner one, Q1 2024, location partner number two, Q2 2024, that kind of thing. And then that those are coming, gives you a better idea of the structure, and you also can put some timeframes on it. Okay. So what are some other things that you should think about? Well, first of all, in building your business, you should look at specialization. How niche are your roles going to be? The perfect example in real estate is, are you going to have salespeople who go out and work with buyers and sellers? Or are you going to take the transaction and you're going to parse it apart? So, for example, there are a lot of teams that have had a lot of success working with showing specialists. So their agents would not only be separated between listing specialists and buyer specialists, but within their buyer specialists, they'd also be separated into buyer specialists who focused on lead generation and closing buyer representation contracts. And then other agents would pick them up and they'd take those contracts, those new clients, and they'd take them in the car, they'd find them properties, and they would hand them back to the person who signed the contract originally to go through the deal formalization process, the negotiations and all that. So depending on what your goals are for your business, you should think about how much you want to make it intricate. A more generalized role, typically like I'm a sales agent, I do both sides. That can be more attractive to some because it represents some freedom. They can go out and they can work with any client they choose. It also, as the business owner, means that it's kind of simpler. So why doesn't everyone do that? Well, here's the deal. If you do create more specialization, then what we find is that, first of all, you can better systemize the role. You can have better quality control because there's people who just do one little piece. You can get really granular with it. And many people would say, most importantly, it often leads to better profitability because you've got one person who's just amazing at a certain piece of the role. And as opposed to letting someone do everything and usually compensating them on commission, what we often see when we get really granular and break roles apart is that the person who is doing the individual roles, like all the little pieces of the transaction, they'll often be on a salary or they might be on a blend, salary plus bonus or something like that. Another consideration that I've hinted at and you should think about is how people will progress to different roles. So, I mean, it's easy with your first hire. You're going to hire an executive assistant. They're going to do all the stuff you throw at them. And then most likely, if they're good, you're going to advance them to be operations manager, director of operations, team manager, something like that. I see a lot of people who get their first hire trying to make their executive assistant into a team manager and tasking them with accountability of salespeople. Pro tip, just don't do that. They're not a salesperson. They don't have the experience. Your agents aren't going to listen to them. And usually the personality style that is going to be really solid with administrative stuff is not highly assertive. So it doesn't tend to work out. You want them to kind of stay in their lane. I'm administrative, I'm marketing, I'm deal transaction management. I am not sales. I'm not, right? So think about what would make sense. Remember, this is going to be a human. This human is going to have a certain disposition. They're going to be predisposed to certain behavioral styles, certain skill sets. Keep them in their lane. Help them grow in the areas that they're good. Just like you're great at sales and you don't want to slow down and learn systems, they're good at systems. They don't want to try to jump out of their comfort zone, become a salesperson. Another thing to think about when you're building your organization chart is span of command. Okay, so this one's so cool. In the Army, what they did this study years ago where they looked at all the admirals who were the most effective. And they're like, well, these guys have some amazing leadership juice going on. Let's figure out what it is that has made them so strong at leading the charge. Like they've been our most effective, and stop, full period, right? And what they found when they looked at these admirals, they looked at the number of direct reports that they had. And what they found was that the ones that were the most effective typically only had 4 to 6 people who reported directly to them, which is counterintuitive. You think an admiral, like they must have 300, 500, 1,000 people. But no, what they did was they created this pyramid of command where they would have 4 to 6 direct reports. Those 4 to 6 direct reports would have 4 to 6 direct reports. And then at a certain point when authority didn't demand that the individuals had too much face time. They didn't bear too much responsibility. Like if you're leading a platoon, then they could expand it out. But for key individuals, decision makers, the ones who are at a high level of trust that the mission relied on, generally these people needed to have like unbridled access to leadership. And so they didn't take many on. So when building this, one of the things that most people fall victim to in the beginning of their growth is they do the opposite. So instead of having 4 to 6 direct reports, they have bicycle spoke leadership. Everything comes back to me. I'm the hub. Every single person communicates with me. It's overwhelming. It doesn't allow you to continue doing all the other things you need to do. And it can really challenge the value that you represent to the team because they just feel like you're always overwhelmed and you don't want to talk to them. I will put a caveat here. Some agents go out and hire a whole bunch of buyer's agents. So you might start building a team and say, oh, I'm going to go hire, 10 buyer's agents. I don't recommend it. I recommend you hire 2 or 3 really good people as opposed to 10 or 20. But if you do that, you obviously, if you're in the very beginning of your team, you probably financially can't afford to bring in a team manager yet. And so in that instance, what's going to be your only option that still makes sense? And again, it's not a good option because you shouldn't do this, but what you need to do is figure out some kind of group accountability, group numbers reporting, and just manage everyone on the same schedule. And then finally, when you're thinking this all through, you're trying to figure this out, the last thing that I'll say is it's that famous Einstein quote, make everything as simple as possible, but no simpler. So it can be really tempting to create this ornate design, this like incredibly complex machine with all these interwoven parts. Don't do that. Okay. Just try to make it as simple as possible. If you could draw it out for someone and then a week later they could draw it back for you because it was just that straightforward, that's what we're going for here. In time, you can get to the point that you have a higher degree of specialization or key roles, and you're going to discover things that you need, and that's okay. This is a living document. And at the same time, don't start out trying to see too far around the corner. Just keep it simple. Put 3 or 4 moves, maybe 5 to 10 max ahead of yourself. And remember that some of those moves are just going to be repetitive, right? I'm going to hire my first agent. That agent's going to crush it. I'm going to hire 3 more agents. I'm going to put them in next to them. That guy might move up, right? They might become like a lead agent or something like that. Don't overcomplicate it, okay? While you're here, this is a great time to think about the money behind all of this. Because remember, all these people are going to need to get paid, right? So, how much are you spending on administrative salaries? How much are you spending on lead generation? What's your cost of doing business? Like when your agents sell a property, what percentage of that is going to them? And I like to just kind of put larger areas of my business inside a little circle and say, like, this has to stay around 10%. This can't go above 40 or 50. And then figure out what your profitability is going to be. Remember, you're going to need to pay yourself as well, right? If you're doing anything for the business, if you have a job and that job can include CEO or top salesperson, you should get paid for doing that job and you should get paid for owning the business separately. If you do a job for free, your profitability is going to look real cool until you try to replace yourself and then you realize that you painted yourself into the corner of the room financially because the team's model doesn't work unless you do a job. That's not cool. Okay, a couple easy guidelines. Your lead generation should cost 10% or somewhere near there. Your salaries should be about another 10%. Pardon me. I mean, your best case scenario, honestly, is that your cost of sales stays at 40% or lower. Most people really screw this up. We pay way too much. You can keep cost of sale. That's what your agents collect when they close a deal. If you do it right, it's possible to make it 30% throughout the entire business. The only way you're going to get there is having highly specialized roles and putting a lot of it on salaried people instead of commission sale people. It's hard to hire for, but it's possible. If you do that, you can get to the point that you're netting about 40% on a large team, because you'd have about 30 going to your expenses, you'd have 30 going to your salespeople, and you'd have 40% as profit. Most teams only achieve 20 or 30% profitability. And I've got some slides that kind of lead you through what to expect with different size teams. I'm always happy to share. If someone wants to reach out to me, hit me up, I'll get them to you. But just go through some broad strokes financially. Try to figure out what you think you'll be able to do it for. Okay. So the last thing I would say that I'd really want to think about was, okay, so I gave a path for an administrator to climb up the ladder in my business. I gave a path for a salesperson to advance and become, a junior leader and then take on a team, or maybe have a showing assistant come in under them. So I've created these pathways for people on my team. And another thing that a lot of people forget is what their pathway is. So as the leader of the business, you should always be thinking about who your replacement is. Now, you're like, okay, well, Sean, like I'm still new, I'm still building this. Why would I want to replace myself? And I think a lot of people hear this and they think, oh, I'm gonna hire a CEO and I'm gonna say goodbye to the business and I'm gonna be gone. And that's actually not what this is about. Who your replacement is about all the jobs that you do. As the business owner in a startup, you are the person who shuts the doors at night. You're the person who answers the phone calls when no one else is there. You're the person who turns the dishwasher over before you go home. You're the person who goes out to buy a new computer when the computer breaks. You're everything to the business. So right now you probably have 5 or 10 jobs. Ultimately, you might aspire to have no jobs and just own the business and have a reporting meeting on a weekly basis with your leadership team where they run you through stuff. That's a great goal to have. In fact, I aspire to do that in any business I start. I love that idea. But for right now, look at all the jobs that you have and start thinking about how you could replace yourself from all of the different jobs. Okay. This is going to do 2 things. First of all, it's going to buy you back a little bit of much needed time freedom, because we all get into business to control our own schedule and then fantasize for the remainder of our career about only working 9 to 5, because we work a lot when we own our own business. The other thing that it's going to do is it's going to make you more effective, because ideally you look at all the stuff that you are responsible for. You look at what serves the business at the highest level, i.e. financially, and then you look at what makes your heart sing. What do you actually love doing for the business? And if you can push all the crap out of your way and move yourself slowly to the point that you're just doing that thing, those 2 or 3 main parts of your role that you're like, I love this. It makes a huge difference in my business. I have fun with it. It gives me energy. If you can just get it down to that, then over time, you're going to be working less, enjoying your business more. You're going to have more energy, and you're going to be making the greatest impact. So write down all the jobs you have right now, and ask yourself, which ones of these could I remove right away? This could be through your first hire coming in and just taking 80% of your email off your plate. That's one that I always try to have. Maybe scheduling is challenging for you. Maybe whenever you do photos, you have to upload a bunch of stuff, and you could just get the photos done and then someone else could upload it. It can be small. Don't ever think that a job is too small to give away. That's ridiculous. I, for a while, was even having my admin start every email response for me. So I'd go into my drafts. They would have responded to everything that needed to get responded to. And I would go in and open up my drafts and I see I've got 6 drafts started. And they'd just do the simplest little things. They'd, CC the people who needed to be added to the chain. They'd say, hi, Grace. Thanks so much for your email. Here's a response. I might touch it up a little bit. Any little thing that saves you 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever, when added up, these things are huge in time savings. Another thing to kind of look at is what the next few quarters are going to look like. So for me, I'm obsessed with time. It's like the one non-variable we all share, right? And so I'm always looking at not just right now, but every quarter. How can I take some time back? How can I take time back for me? How could I commit myself to more little things with my family that would force me to be more effective when I was at work? How could I remove myself from a job next quarter that would allow me to be in a more impactful part of my role, or to add another project or move something along faster? So think about over time how you can pull yourself out of stuff to allow yourself to be present where you're more needed. And then also, when you're looking at these jobs, before you go back to the org chart and start thinking about hiring and people and all this stuff, the other thing that you want to do is you want to look at the jobs and say, do I really need to do this crap? Could I simplify it? Could I eliminate it? Could a piece of technology do this, right? Think about Calendly. Calendly is a beautiful tool. I don't recommend it for salespeople. You should be booking your own appointments. But Calendly has saved so many people so much time because it just makes it so frictionless. You don't need to sit there and ask those questions. And then challenge yourself. How many how many moves is the least number of moves that you could make to get yourself down to just your key 1, 2, or maybe 3, like those key 3 tasks? I do accountability with the team, I meet with my director of operations, and I do the marketing. And that's all I do. If you could get down to that, then you'd be so effective at those key things. Okay, so that's it. I promised it was a simple one. This does not need to take you more than half an hour. Sitting down and doing this, again, it's going to give you a clear vision of what you're building. It's going to help you elaborate what that is to people. Hopefully it's going to get you excited, because a big part of this is taking time back and space back for you. And all you're going to do is you're going to draw what you are right now, what you want to be in a couple years. You're going to start labeling some of the roles that you think you need to bring in, maybe put some time frames around it, and don't overcomplicate it. Just keep this simple and have fun. This is a big part of business building. This is a big step for you, and you deserve it. You deserve to have the support that lets you be the best version of the business owner that you're growing to be. As always, I'm so grateful you took the time to watch. I appreciate you, and I am looking forward to sharing more again with you soon. Thanks, and we'll be back next week.